So, folks, this is our last 1998 movie, which I feel like these 1990 movies were really good, but kind of a blur. Like, I can't believe this is the last one. And per tradition, our last one always highlights the Oscars of that year, or actually Oscars of 1999, which wait till next year because I'll talk about how that's when I graduated college, and I'll be sure to weave that into every episode. But we're talking about the Oscars of 1999, which, you know, in retrospect, were like PS pretty boring because it highlighted pretty much one movie and then one insane acceptance speech, which we'll get to in a second. The best, which everybody forgot about until I mentioned that, and then I was like, "Oh, right." So the best supporting actor was James Coburn, Affliction. I don't even know that I've ever heard of this movie.
No, either have I. I don't have
no recollection for Affliction. Yeah. So I mean, James Coburn is a great actor. I'm sure he was great in it. Zero recollection. All right, and then Best Supporting Actress, maybe a little controversial, and it is the first of the Shakespeare in Love sweep. But Judi Dench, Shakespeare in Love, she plays Queen Elizabeth, right? If I'm remembering correctly. Yes, and it's 8 minutes, 7 minutes, something like that. If that. It's like a tiny, 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 tiny part. You know, it's Judi Dench, so she eats it up as best as she can, but that's what she got the Best Supporting Actress for, and people were hot to trot about it.
Well, who is she up against for that? That they should have gotten it instead of Judi Dench?
Yeah. Oh, she was up against Lynn Redgrave for Gods and Monsters, Rachel Griffiths for Hillary and Jackie, Brenda Blethyn for her Little Voice, and Kathy Bates for Primary Colors.
All of which were much longer and better performances.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, go Judy, but still... That was weird. Best Original Screenplay, Tom Stoppard for Shakespeare in Love. Okay, fine. Best Adapted Screenplay, Bill Condon for Gods and Monsters, which I do agree with. And then Best Actor, as soon as I say his name, you're going to remember him. Roberto Benigni for Life is Beautiful, where he climbed over the seats and basically did a whole spectacle before he even got to the stage. I have actually never seen that movie. I have no desire to see this movie. I'm sure it's fine.
It's an excellent movie.
It is an excellent movie, but I don't know that we should give out Oscars for playing yourself. I'm just going to say that. I mean, he was very good in the movie, but I get the sense now that he climbed over the seats and stuff that he was basically playing himself in the film. So just saying.
Interesting. All right. Maybe I'll watch it. Probably not. Best Actress, Gwyneth Paltrow for Shakespeare in Love. Also, that awful dress that she wore. That's all I can remember. That pink dress that didn't fit her in the boobs. Yeah.
I feel like if in my mind is painting a picture where she's basically wearing a nightgown. That's what I remember.
Yeah, it's kind of. I'll share it in the chat. I remember it just sort of hung on her. That's what I remember about it.
And to clarify, I don't have problems with Gwyneth Paltrow. I mean, I know that she's kind of weird and everything. Her performance was fine. I'm upset with the Academy for giving her the award when I personally feel it clearly should have gone to Cate Blanchett. Just going to say.
Mm-hmm.
Which we're going to get to in about 30 seconds. Best Director, Steven Spielberg for Saving Private Ryan. I suppose I can't argue with that, even though that's another movie I've never seen. I'm good with that. I don't ever need to see it. And then last but certainly not least, Best Picture, Shakespeare in Love. I remember watching these Oscars and them reading that and me being like, okay. Like, it was kind of one of those, like, all right. All of these. Yeah. I think in any other year, Elizabeth would have obviously swept these Oscars. But, you know, when you have two competing sort of set in the same-ish time period movies, and one is a little bit kickier than the other, you know, that might be a little bit more Oscar bait. I don't know. I'm no Oscar prognosticator, but that's my thought on it.
Welcome to the Rewind Project, where Allie, Matt, and Eric take another look at your favorite milestone movies through the lens of our present day. Will it be a skip, rent, or buy? Stay tuned and find out.
Hey everybody, welcome back to 1998, our last movie of the 1998 season. Like Allie said, man, this has just been a blur. I can't believe we've gone through so many films so quickly. Good films too. I've enjoyed this season.
It has been kind of all over the place, which I love when we do one of our mini seasons, when the movies are sort of like very all over the place. I do enjoy that because, and there were a lot of movies this particular mini season that I had not seen. So that was exciting for me.
Today, to talk about our final movie, Elizabeth, we have much beloved friend of the pod, Justin Godwin, joining us today.
Woo-hoo!
Hello. So happy to be back.
Hello, Justin. We are excited to have you here. Well, I'm excited to have you here. Maybe you won't be excited after we talk about this movie, but we'll see.
Well, hey, you should at least be excited to have me here on a non-holiday movie.
It's true. It's true.
As everybody can already knows, Allie has some spicy takes on this film, which I was kind of surprised by, and I am like all here for because I
was surprised by it too. Like I really had a visceral reaction to rewatching this movie.
Are we really surprised? I mean, it's Allie.
I'm not contrarian. I sometimes like the movies that we watched. Well, the next.
I mean, we're not saying you're a contrarian. You always have a very interesting point of view, and I that's one of the main reasons why I tune into the pod, but is to hear what Allie has to say about it, because I think that she's going to approach it one way, and oh no, I am quite wrong.
You shouldn't inflate my ego. You shouldn't tell me that. I mean, I always have an opinion about whatever. Yeah, I definitely have opinions. That's for sure. So, we'll get into it. And I have some theories about why rewatching this movie 25 years later probably didn't hit the way that it did for me in the movie theater. Because I definitely saw this movie in the movie theater because in late high school and most of college, and I still kind of am, but not to the extent. I was a real Anglophile, so I am quite sure I saw this movie in the movie theater.
Yeah, I love a good period piece. That's one of the reasons I was definitely in the theater for this movie. So again, we are talking about Elizabeth today, written by Michael Hurst and directed by Shakur Kapoor. I believe I said that.
Has
yes, you did.
Has this person ever directed anything else? I didn't look him up.
So I did look him up, and he directed The Golden Age, which he did a brilliant job with that too. But most of the other films that he has participated in, by the way, he's an actor as well, were all Indian and Bollywood type films. So from what I did, or from what I found in looking him up, I found that this was pretty much his only big Hollywood production that he's had a hand in. And I think first time out of the gate was pretty darn spectacular.
I feel like coming out of Bollywood, anybody coming out of Bollywood is usually top notch because, they churn those movies out, like 300 a year or something insane like that. And so you already sort of have that professionalism. You have that ability to just kind of get on top of things. And you have, I'm sure it's probably like a good crash course in making movies. So.
Well, and they're also large movies. Like there's a lot going on inside those films. So, which I think probably helped a lot with this movie. It's like, with the cinematography, all the moving pieces that we had story-wise, all the different characters and everything. It felt like there was action at all times, really, except for the quiet moments with like between two people. But anytime you were in the castle or anything, there was always people moving in the background. There was always something going on. It was never just like one person there. There were so many moving parts, and it felt like you were kind of part of it. As you can see, I actually already love this movie. There's no holds bar about that.
No spoilers.
So, I was not the only one to love this movie. This movie had tons and tons of accolades. Notable achievements: it was an Oscar nominee for Best Picture, Best Actress in a Leading Role, Cate Blanchett, Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Music Original Score, which I do love the score of this movie. It did win for Best Makeup. It should have won for Best Picture, Best Leading Role, Cate Blanchett, Best Cinematography, Best Costume Design. I personal opinion, I think this movie really did not get what it deserved at the Oscars, and it was kind of snubbed.
I would love to know, like, I'm sure that this is not it, but I would love to know a movie that was nominated for X number of categories and won one makeup out of all of these other things. And again, I said it in the cold open, but I think that if Shakespeare in Love hadn't, if those two movies hadn't come out at the same time and they sort of take away the voters, I would assume kind of similar-ish, it would have won a lot more than it did, but it just was sort of wrong time, wrong place, perhaps. I mean, that's a lot of It's a lot of Oscars to be nominated for to win one.
It is.
And that was just the Oscars. I mean, Golden Globe nominee for Best Motion Picture, Best for Drama, and Best Director. Golden Globe winner for Best Actress in a Motion Picture. BAFTA nominee, Best Film, Screenplay, Performance by an Actor in a Supporting Role for Geoffrey Rush, Best Production Design, Best Costume Design, and Best Editing. And then winner for Best Performance by an Actress in Leading Role, Best Cinematography, and Best Makeup and Hair. So and that was just like the tip of the iceberg. If you look at everything that this was nominated for around the world, this was a very loved film. And people really acknowledged it as a very well-made film.
For a good reason.
I personally believe for good reason. Plot, a much overlooked and maligned step-sibling inherits the family business and navigates the treacherous waters of ascension and religion as she realizes her true worth and potential.
That is so creative right there. I love how you wrote the plot.
Did you write that up?
That's excellent.
It's usually cut and paste from IMDb because they have the best log lines because it's like a sentence long, but that's really good. Maybe you should write all of my plot things for my outlines moving forward.
Hey, you can always contract that to me. I'm very small fees.
Okay, all right. Low writing rates. Yeah.
Real work for chocolate.
Exactly. Doesn't even have to be great chocolate. Peanut butter M&Ms. I'm your man. So cast, of course, the always wonderful Cate Blanchett. This was my first introductory to her. She plays Queen Elizabeth, the titular character. I'm sorry, I just edited the other episode where we use that word constantly, and I can't stop using it now.
It's a good word.
It's one of my favorite words.
It's a good word.
When else can you say without anybody saying anything to you?
My inner 7-year-old just screams every time.
Loved her in this movie. The progression of her from a young girl to an actual monarch controlling her own realm, I think you actually get that from her. I think she changes, she grows in the character. I did find the one scene with her, and I forgot about this, when they are in the confessional. You know, at that point, I had just viewed her as an innocent girl, and I didn't think that she really wanted to be queen. It didn't even occur to me. And all of a sudden, he's talking to her about, we are trying to secure your throne and everything. And she's just looking at him like, okay, so what are we doing next? And I was like, oh crap, she's actually been on board with this the entire time, and they've been talking about this. So, like, this is not new to her, and she's been playing the Game of Thrones for a while now.
No, I mean, look, I have a lot of thoughts about this movie, but I mean, I can't fault anything about Cate Blanchett in this performance. And it's just interesting to me because we've seen this a lot. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. Like, everybody thinks they want to be king, queen, president, whatever. And then you actually get there and you're like, oh, fuck, this is really hard work. I've got to please a lot of people. She had the extra layer of the religion bullshit on top of everything, on top of just normal, like, state of play. Like, and so it is interesting. And I didn't remember a lot from this movie when I saw it in the movie theater, but one thing I did remember was the haircutting scene and sort of the end where she does become the true, like, Queen Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. And basically, like, I appreciate that even in the 1500s, she recognized that men are trash and basically was like, fuck y'all, I'm gonna be married to England. And, this is what happens when you have a woman in charge, and she got shit done. So, and I just like the progression of her looks too. Like, she started off, obviously she's in that flowing dress and they're doing some sort of weird Mayday dance. I don't know, sort of 1500s Tudor situation. And then like all they needed was like a maypole. And then, to be in the queenly gowns and then, to see her, and then she cuts her hair off and, really comes out as what you would think, what we remember from history class as Queen Elizabeth. So, and she did that so subtly across the board that you don't even realize it until you get to the end and you're like, oh shit, like she really progressed from a hair, makeup, costume, attitude standpoint. So I did enjoy that.
And this is something that I clocked when I was watching it as well. By the time I got to the end of it, I just had this epiphany. Like, she does an excellent look. Cate Blanchett can do no wrong in my mind. I mean, look, between her and Tilda Swinton and Meryl Streep, I mean, they are my trifecta of divas. But looking at the film from the beginning to the end, I did notice that she did a great job of descending in her emotions. Innocence that turns to fear, insecurity to confidence, love to betrayal, hopeful to jaded. I mean, she does these all, basically not when one ends, the next begins. It's just she's doing all of these emotions parallel to each other until the end. And the other thing that I wanted to note here is you were talking about her transformation into the Virgin Queen. It's interesting the writers intimated that Elizabeth's physical transformation was to emulate the Virgin Mary. So I wonder how true that was, and that she was, we have no record to say that she stared at a statue of Mary and had this epiphany herself. But her hopes of being worshipped and loved and respected were supposedly inspired by the Virgin Mary. And I wonder how radical the porcelain virginal image was in that time when she, put on this makeup and she basically turned into a porcelain doll with the, all the wigs and, cutting off her hair and everything. I wonder how radical and jarring that might have been to her court.
It's interesting. I didn't put the two together, the Virgin Mary and the Virgin Queen, but there is an interesting scene where she's, she doesn't quite, she's not Catholic, so she doesn't quite understand the reverence for the Virgin Mary. And they're basically like, well, people need something to believe in. And this is sort of the living, embodiment of, a disciple of Jesus Christ. I'm a Jew. I'm sort of making this up as I go along, but I think I'm correct.
What?
What? My God. So all this Christian back and forth, I'm like, guys, just get it together. But now that you said that,
it is a hot mess.
It's a hot mess. That's really interesting that she was not only styling herself as like, I am married to England, but styling herself as like, you can choose me as your new deity, your new touchstone, your new religion. That's really interesting. I never thought about that until you just said that.
That last conversation with her and Sir Francis Walsingham, I mean, where, he says they need something to idolize, essentially. They need something to look up to and be better than themselves. It's an interesting point, and I kind of feel like a lot of times that's what people need. That's what pulls people together, is a common thing that they can all surround themselves around. And she is the figurehead of the English church. So in my mind, it actually makes sense to make herself almost a deity unto herself for them to actually kind of worship, or at least recognize as the head of their church. She is not the head of the church. There's a different term for it, because the head of the church is Jesus Christ. It is,
it's like his representative, right?
Yeah, it's like the main representative. She's chairman of the board. So JC is CEO and King or Queen is chairman of the board. Okay, got it. Because that was a big to do when they did the Reformation itself. Having wording it properly when they did the split from, although the Pope, he acts like he's fucking Jesus Christ. And for all our Catholic listeners, I'm sorry, but watching this movie, he basically thinks that he is God because he can have anybody killed that he believes he wants to in, God's name. And it's just because he wants to. So I'm basically
how very pious of him.
Yes, how very pious of him. I absolve you of all these crimes. Yes.
That was, I'm distilling it down, but that was really the big thing during the Reformation and the Renaissance, was the divine power of the Pope versus the divine power of the deity, or of the king and queen. And, because they believe themselves to be descended from God. And, so it was basically like two sets of powers that think that they're in the right. And that's when you get conflict. That's when you get lots of bloodshed over really stupid stuff.
And of course, in this particular movie with Cate playing Elizabeth, of course, it's a powerful woman who is surrounded by men who insist on mansplaining and being contrary at every single turn. And then you add in the religion on top of that, and it was kind of cringy at a certain point.
Basically just, ban all men throughout history, currently, all of the above,
Well, I did put in my notes here, just 3 simple words: men are pigs.
Yeah.
We see that in most of the movies that we watch. It's very interesting.
It is very interesting.
Never really learn from it.
It makes for great entertainment, I guess, and maybe it's because it hits close to home for most viewing audiences. I don't know, but I'd like to see something that's a little bit strays away from that one day.
Yeah, I don't like my real life to look like my fictional life, and vice versa.
Well, next up is Head Pig, Christopher Eccleston as the Duke of Norfolk. Possibly his hottest role ever, I will say.
I will agree with that. Honestly, like the old men, not so much, but all the young men were very hot in this movie, and we're gonna get to Joseph Fiennes in a second. It was fine. I just feel like this is such a good role. Like the Duke of Norfolk was like a real shit, and I don't know. He just sort of swans about. Like I don't know. I feel like they could have made him a lot more overtly evil. Not in like because he was at one point, a couple points, he was really close to like twirling his mustache in like type of situation. But I don't know. I don't know. I feel like he could be more central to all of the storylines than he was. You know, he was just sort of there.
I think it was perfect. I think he played it as muted as he could have for any real life person in that position that he was in, so that he wouldn't get caught. I mean, he was trying to obviously angle to take over the monarchy, and he had all these plans, and it's well documented because I was very interested in the history of everything about this movie in this time period. And I mean, there is documented record that he was, planning to marry Mary Queen of Scots? Is that So I mean, so I think that he played it as restrained as that real life person probably had to in real life. Now, could he have amped it up a little bit for the viewing audience? Maybe so, but I think that would be best served on the stage in front of a huge theater instead of on a screen where you've got extreme close-ups.
Well, I also think it shows how devious and intelligent the Duke of Norfolk was, that he's never actually seen doing anything. He's part of all of this. He's helping the machinations. He's making sure the wheels are turning, but he's being very careful about not having his fingers dirty. I mean, it took until the end of the movie to finally catch him. And that was a big act on his part to actually sign that parchment, because I don't think he wanted to do it, because that's evidence. So that was a big step on his part to actually sign the parchment, which is really the only action he's seen taken as a villain, really. I mean, so I thought that was really interesting. And
he was basically the coercer in chief is what he was.
Yes.
Yeah, he was the fixer. He was the Tudor fixer.
Tudor fixer.
Sounds like you're saying tuna fish for some reason.
I do like tuna fish too. Yeah.
They all
stunk. Oh my god! Every time I see a period piece like that, I'm just like, oh god! Everybody probably smelled so bad.
Can you think of a hot summer in a castle with all those layers of thick fabric?
With no fans or anything, and just have people have to wear like perfume fans or like perfume handkerchiefs because everybody smelled so bad. Gross.
I mean, was the earth maybe just colder so we didn't sweat as much and stink as much all the time?
I mean, I don't know.
Probably not.
But I guess if nobody bathed, then everybody smelled the same. So maybe it would be different. I don't know. Tune in for a special episode on the bathing habits of the Tudors.
Well, speaking of which, next up, Kathy Burke as Queen Mary Tudor, probably the sweatiest female performance I've ever seen in the screen. Generally, it's men that are just like sweating profusely.
I had a question, and I don't know if you guys know the answer, and perhaps our fabulous listeners will tell me. Was there such a beauty disparity between Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth? Because it just was, and Cate Blanchett is like an angel, is like a sweet little baby angel, and then you got Queen Mary Tudor who's sweaty, and look, she was sick, I get it, but like she was the way Kathy Burke played her was like almost like weirdly frantic. It was very hard to watch the performance because I don't know, it was just she played it so manic and maybe what do I know about Mary, Queen Mary? Maybe she had some undiagnosed mental illness or whatever. But yeah, I just like when the two of them came together, it was just very stark. I'm like, yikes.
So I can't really speak to the manic part, but I can only assume that the reason why she was acting that way is because this woman who was going to ascend the throne was, the bastard child of her father, who also, cast out her mother. And I mean, there was probably obviously a lot of bad blood there.
Sure.
She did have the opportunity to prevent her from assuming the throne, which still baffles me why she didn't do that. Any other monarch that hated somebody so much would have just done it without a second thought. But of the image, yeah, if you Google an image of Mary the First, bless her heart, she looks like a balding man in a dress.
No.
She does. Very mannish figures.
Oh.
Yeah.
Poor thing.
Sorry, Queen Mary. We've all been there.
Hey, but at least you got to be royalty for a while, even if you weren't unattractive.
Yeah.
She obviously did not get the Holbein treatment.
Yeah, no. I didn't know Kathy Burke. I looked her up because, I watched it on Amazon. I love their X-ray feature where you can look up and see who's in the scene. I don't know. She was in Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, which is a great movie. Also a very good book. But yeah, I didn't recognize her from anything else, but she did look familiar to me.
Well, I brought her into the list because I felt like the first 10 minutes with her in there was it was a longer 10 minutes than a certain other supporting actress that actually won. But it was also really, to me, a very powerful performance because she is very conflicted. You can obviously see that, and she is feeling the sense of some kind of illness too, which they described as cancer. I'm assuming it was some kind of cancer.
Yeah, so, I think she said tumor. I mean, ovarian cancer, maybe stomach cancer. It was definitely, if it was something that made her look pregnant, it was something along those lines.
Yeah,
uterine cancer.
So, I mean, I that whole performance actually, I was really enthralled with that because I didn't know, especially, and I remember back to the first time, I know obviously Elizabeth has survived because we have her in history, but it's like, that is a very tenuous moment. Like in any other movie, if I didn't know the actual history, I would have wondered, is she going to kill her?
Right.
Like what is going to happen right now? So I thought it was a really spectacular performance on our part, even though it's a much smaller role in the overall film.
Well, I think you sort of have to set up the fact that these two women are half sisters, but they couldn't be obviously more different looks, religion, attitudes, parents, that sort of thing. So I think you sort of have to have that in a movie about Elizabeth, is to sort of set that up.
Well, next up, somebody who is truly delicious, Joseph Fiennes as Robert Dudley, Earl of
Leicester.
Joseph Fiennes makes thine sacred member turgid.
He's so hot in this movie. He's just really, I've always found him more attractive than Rafe.
Yes.
Great. But, I don't know if y'all watched Handmaid's Tale, but he is in Handmaid's Tale. Well, spoiler, he was. And he's just as delicious in that movie. It's just, obviously he's much, much, much younger here, but I don't know. God, he's hot. He is so hot. I feel like he needed to have
a fine wine now.
Yeah, he needs to have a bigger career. Like, he's definitely doing shit and making the money and whatever. But I don't know. He didn't take off like his brother. I always find the trajectory of acting brothers or acting sisters or a family interesting to see who kind of rises to the top and who doesn't and why that is.
I feel like between the two brothers, they both have the same acting ability, and I'm sure that I'm going to get pushback from people out there, but I think they're both equally great actors. But I think where Rafe outranks him is that menacing look that he has, and that's been able to get him more roles. So just basically based on his looks, which you would think, Joseph Fiennes is hot as hell, he would probably have more roles rolling in. But no, I think maybe it's just harder to find somebody who's a fantastic, tame, muted, powerful, menacing actor, but also has that look as well.
Rafe plays a great villain. You can, and you feel the anger and the power behind it, but it is always just kind of a muted performance, and it's just it's behind the eyes. He does have that very angular look. I mean, he's still an attractive guy, but he's not as classically handsome, I think, as as Joseph is. So, and I'm a sucker for olive skin and dark features and blue eyes. So, and his are brown, but I mean, yeah.
And poor Joseph, he's probably fallen victim his entire life of the conversation that we're now having.
I'm sure.
He starts talking about him and then ends up talking about his brother.
I did really enjoy him in this movie. By the end of the film, I think he really does love her, but I can't tell if he's actually still playing her for power. Like, does he want to be king or, queen consort or what? I mean, or king consort or whatever. I just don't really know if he does it because he loves her or not. And I feel by the end of the movie he does, but then why are you banging her handmaids during the entire film? So
love makes you do weird things. And look, I think he reached a point where he actually betrayed her. I think his subconscious was, well, if I can't have her, nobody else can. And I'm going to bring her down to make her pay and break her heart like she's broken mine. But he was also married. I mean, come on, dude. So men are trash. Men are trash.
I just feel too, it's like, it's not unlike the way that Prince Philip acted in The Crown when the second Elizabeth, who also reigned for a very long time, became queen, and he couldn't handle the fact that now she was in charge, that she had all of these official duties, that he was just sort of like the dude on the side. And, so it's sort of interesting to see. I mean, they were not married, obviously, Robert and Elizabeth I. But it's sort of the same thing. Like they're so, especially men of that era, they're so used to having the power, and now he doesn't have the power. And so he doesn't have the power, and he doesn't have the girl. So he's sort of adrift in a sea of nobles. And I think that just sort of like poisons his brain and, made him become what he was at the end.
Well, if he wouldn't dress like such a fop, I mean, those are some original bell bottoms that he had going on most of the movie.
That one when he's wearing like that lime green undershirt or like button down situation, I was like, what are we doing here? I'm sure that it was historically accurate, but it was definitely a little wacky.
It was just a little dandy.
Yeah, some doubloons. I don't know. It was definitely they dressed some sort of way in the British court. Yeah.
Next up is Richard Attenborough as Sir William Cecil.
This is one of the first times I've seen him in a role that I didn't like him. I mean, I think he was a good actor. He acted this role very well, but it was the first time he played a character that I just didn't like. Because, of course, we love him in a movie that you're going to be talking about soon, Jurassic Park. And then I also liked him, I believe, if I'm recalling, he was also in The Great Escape. And I liked him in that role as well. I hope I'm not misremembering
No,
that.
I think that sounds right. I've not seen that movie, but I think you're right. He was fine. I mean, it's sort of like a weird role.
He cares about her, but I think he cares more about England. He's not really... I mean, I think he wanted her as queen so that he could shepherd England in the way that he saw fit, and she was actually just a tool for him. So I think that's why he doesn't come across as a really great character. Because you think at first he's going to be this very fatherly figure that really is going to shepherd her and take care of her. And then as you progress, he's like, no, he just kind of ignores her and tries to toss her to the side. Like, just sit down and listen to me. Okay, this is what we're going to do instead. You don't know what you're doing.
Well, he's dedicated to England, and he's also dedicated to the Catholic faith, too. That's what it
was. He dedicated to the Catholic faith?
Wasn't he?
I don't think he had a qualm because he wanted her in power. If he was dedicated to the Catholic faith, he would have wanted to get rid of her immediately.
That's fair. Didn't pick up on that either.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody
in Elizabeth's
everybody on Elizabeth's side would have been Protestant or Protestant leaning.
Because he also was the one that brought in our next character. Tour de force performance, I thought. Geoffrey Rush as Sir Francis Walsingham.
Fascinating character. And I'm very curious about where he was before he arrived, because did you catch that piece of dialogue that made it sound like he was in exile?
He was. I believe he was actually in France at the time.
What a great place to be in exile.
So I just looked him up, and it's so funny, the little description says, Sir Francis Walsingham was principal secretary to Queen Elizabeth, blah, blah, until his death, and was popularly remembered as her spy master. So in Game of Thrones parlance, he's Varys.
Played it well, too. I mean, he had definitely had his network, you could see, and he generally always shows some very handsome young men, or at least younger men. I was very sad when Sir Thomas Eliot was offed by the priest in the water, and nobody even cared. They just were just watching. Like, well, why is he doing that? And they're like, yeah, he must be he must be a traitor then. So we'll just let it go. Another time when the Norfolk did absolutely nothing. He just watched the evil happen, but he didn't stop the evil too, which makes him just as evil. But Geoffrey Rush's character, I really loved Sir Francis Walsingham. I thought he was very interesting. He had his finger on everything. The one person that was not trying to control Elizabeth, but actually trying to help her. And you felt that. I mean, even to the point of I don't know, he must have been bi, because he obviously slept with Mary de Guise and then offed her afterwards. So this man really had no scruples whatsoever when it came to actually killing people. You have to do what you got to do, which was an interesting character.
And I feel, too, that maybe he didn't start out loving Elizabeth. He was just I'm going to, screw these Catholics. But then as she sort of came around to it, he was we could be a great team together. I sort of felt, obviously, by the end, they were, kind of hand in hand together. But I think at the beginning, he was sort of well, I'm just going to do what's right for England and what's right for the Protestants. But then quickly, as a lot of people did, quickly came around.
I got that as well. There was this little hint of, is he being genuinely supportive of her, or is he serving his own interests like everybody else in the court was? But obviously by the end, he basically proves himself. But yeah, this was a fascinating character. I really like this character. And Geoffrey Rush did this in such a way that I guess it's almost like he proved that point of the smartest and the most powerful people in the room are usually the ones that are the quietest. So you sit back and you observe and you basically take everything in, and then you execute on your own, get things taken care of. So yeah, I really love the way that Geoffrey Rush played this part. He's one of those actors as well that I agree. I mean, pretty much any part that he's been in, he's been fabulous. I still need to go back and watch him in the movie that you guys talked about last season. Was it last season?
Shine.
Shine, yes.
I don't know if you need to do that, Justin. I feel like maybe you can save yourself and not watch that movie.
Maybe just watch clips. I mean, so I can get an idea of his performance. Yeah. I know you guys did not care for it that much, according to the episode, but it's still Geoffrey Rush, and I really do like him. But I feel like that most people now associate him with the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, because he really did enter that role and just kind of made it his own. Yeah. It's just like Johnny Depp. He assumed that role and made it his own. And that's what most people, today's generation, knows him for.
Which, I mean, maybe people don't want to be related, have that as their thing. But I don't know. He's great in those movies. I love the Pirates of the Caribbean. I think I've watched the first 4, maybe 3 or 4. Yeah. I loved those movies, and I think that he's great in it. And I don't know, he has some fun. You know what I mean? I feel like even in all of his roles, he imbues a little bit of fun sarcasm in there, which I enjoy.
In anybody else's hands, that probably would have been a very stereotypical character, and I don't think we got that with Geoffrey Rush as playing Captain Bilbo. So I would agree with you. I think that's actually a wonderful performance from him. He did a great job. I mean, without him in the movie, it wouldn't have been nearly as entertaining. So,
which, by the way, this was an excellent role, as I've said many times before, from him. But my favorite role of his was 1998's take on Les Miserables. He played Javert. Masterpiece. Masterful. He did, and he did so well. Yeah, if you have not watched that version, just watch it for him.
Interesting. All right.
This was the version that we watched in high school in lieu of reading the
book. Next up is Fanny Ardant as Mary de Guise. Very brief stint on screen, but every moment on screen I actually really enjoyed of her. She just kind of exuded sex and power, and just kind of was the antithesis of what the men wanted, it seemed like. I mean, and I think it's kind of different than what Elizabeth became at the end of the film, where she becomes this virgin queen, whereas Mary de Guise lived her life as she was, and men still followed her, and she was commanding an army. So I thought it was a really interesting portrayal and an interesting character in the film.
I'm not familiar with her, that she is actually obviously very, very, very famous in France. she's been in like I looked her up, and she's been in like 8 million French movies, and is like, you know, a mainstay of French cinema. But yeah, I liked her a lot. It was interesting because Cate Blanchett's Elizabeth is so like, she keeps everything inside and is so controlled, but like, it's like party time with Mary de Guise. She's like, let's go, you know, let's, you know, very like, I guess very like English versus French. Let's go. Let's have some great wine. Let's like, you know, see these poor bastards who are killed, and like, then, you know, just, you know, have a good old meal.
But even out on that battlefield, she's looking at all this blood, all this death, does not flinch, and then just makes the decision, English blood on French colors, and sends it back, and just like takes this poor kid and just like make sure he makes it, because I want her to see this tragedy for herself. It's like just like really just like bull by the balls, just kind of like, this is what we're gonna do kind of person.
It is a badass, powerful character, and I loved her in this role. I have not seen her in anything else either, but after seeing her in this, I do want to go back and see some of the other stuff. I obviously watched this with my husband Tom, and he recognized her right off the bat and knew that she was a famous actress, and he recalled her from the 2002 film 8 Women. So that might be something that's on our viewing list coming up.
Nice. Another French actor, Vincent Cassel, as Duc d'Anjou.
I mean, I'm sorry. All I could think of was he's the director in Black Swan, and that's all I could think about. I'm sorry. Like, and he was great. He's very messy in this movie, and I assume that the character is very messy. But like, that's all I could think about was that he was the director in Black Swan, which I fucking love that movie, as you know.
He plays a shit in that movie. He's also the antagonist in Ocean's 12.
That's what I remembered from.
Is he?
Yep.
Yes, that's him.
Stop it.
Mm-hmm.
I've definitely seen that movie, but I don't remember that. I only remember him in Black Swan. That's hilarious. He's also a very famous French actor. Sorry to him to like, you have the French film erasure, but I don't watch a lot of French cinema. So
he plays an antagonist very well. I mean, he was in the Jason Bourne movie. I mean, the actual title, Jason Bourne movie. He did.
What was that? Born 6, Born 7.
I don't know. It's the one that was in 2016. I do know that, but it was just called Jason Bourne. So
Too Born, Too Furious.
But you know, this was a fun role to see him in, because I've never seen him in a role like this before. It's always been that kind of antagonistic, you know, kind of brooding, conniving person, which he kind of played that, but it was just a very, I don't know the right way to explain it, but he was just so out there and such a big persona for this role, and I love how he played that. So there's this one scene where they're at a banquet, and he does not show up for the banquet, and somebody tells Elizabeth that he's sick, and she knows better, so she's like, oh, well, I wanted to give him this gift, and slips a ring off her finger, and she said, I'll go and give it to him myself right now. And of course she walks in, and I'm just like, oh my God, he's going to get caught. This is so good. Drama. And then she walks in and catches him in the middle of an orgy wearing a dress and a wig, and I'm like, oh my God, this is even better. I didn't see this coming. And it was, yeah, I really enjoyed that moment.
So Vincent Cassel wanted this role particularly for that scene. He was so excited to
really
to wear the dress. Yes.
That's excellent.
Yes.
I mean, we love a fluid person, and I loved how Queen Elizabeth didn't even flinch. Like, she was like, you look pretty good, but like you weren't at the banquet. So
well, I guess it does show that he was looking forward to playing that role in that particular scene, because he lit up the room.
And I love that he had the dress that like had the like shell prints right over the boobs. I was like, okay, I can get behind all of this.
Next up is Daniel Craig as John Ballard, the Death Priest.
So the Death Priest, that's amazing. It's a really good wrestling name, Death Priest. I have to say Daniel Craig is hotter as he's older, because he was not that hot in this movie. Like, he had like a weird pancake face. I was like, what's and I knew he was in it because I saw the credits, but I didn't even realize it probably till halfway through the movie. And I was like, oh, that's Daniel Craig? No, he's definitely a much hotter 40 and 50-year-old.
I agree with you on that, though he could still get it inside.
He could get it as Death Priest, really? No.
Oh, yeah, I would
really
not say no to that.
Oh,
I mean, that's a one drink minimum, maybe, but yeah.
No, he didn't. He didn't do anything for me in this movie. I mean, like, he's good, and I like that. I like the Death Priest, and I like that scene where he's like coming towards Elizabeth in his cloak. I love a good cloak. But yeah, no, definitely not attractive to me in this movie.
Yeah, this was the first time that I've seen Daniel Craig in a role and thought, okay, yeah, not that attractive.
Right?
But only 6 years later, I think it was like 5 or 6 years later, he was the lead in Layer Cake, which, anybody in the gay realm that's a Daniel Craig film knows that this is the one that you get to see his peen. So he's very hot in that one. That bathtub scene, oh my gosh. But yes, back to Elizabeth. He did well in this role. It's the bowl cut.
Maybe that's what it is.
I think that might have been.
Maybe that's what it is. Yeah, oof. Nobody. Zero people.
Haircuts mean a lot.
Yeah.
Okay, so just remember in the torture scene where the hair is dangling down and you don't see the bowl cut. Was he sexier there?
No.
He kind of was.
No.
I like what does that say about me? It's the podcast of discovery.
We are definitely not going to unpack that today.
Well, at least the hair was better.
Oh, maybe it was the bowl cut. Maybe that's what it was. It was very much like, what's the movie? Yeah. I'm like thinking back. There's like no good bowl cuts. Like nobody, if Daniel Craig can't look good with a bowl cut, zero people can.
So we should just outlaw bowl cuts.
Yeah. Well, yes, this is true. And like Caesar cuts.
Who do you trust? So the last thing I wanted to talk about is I remember sitting in the theater the first time watching this movie and just sitting there with this overwhelming sense of dread for Elizabeth, because there seemed to be nobody she could turn to that actually was rooting for her. And, until you get to the final moments where you understand that Walsingham is actually loyal to her, not necessarily the government, but or maybe he sees her as the government and wants to make sure that her safety is truly protected. But the overwhelming sense of dread, like I could not imagine, living in that world where everybody that talks to you is just out to get you because they don't care about you. Did you guys experience that same sense of dread while you're watching the movie?
I didn't, but it's perceptive to pick up on that, and I can see where you would get that. And I think that still rings true for the monarchs in Great Britain now. I mean, there's a sense of isolationism, and look, we look at them from the outside, and they have it made. They're so rich. They live in palaces and everything, but I'm sure it is a very isolated existence. And I think it was even more so in this period because, it wasn't a matter of people just kind of, gunning, or positioning themselves against you or trying to get what they want, but, they were trying to kill you or they were trying to get people to kill you or dethrone you. Like, right. I don't think that the British monarch has that to really worry about where Elizabeth did. So it's interesting that you picked up on that. I did not, but I understand where you got that.
I didn't either, and I guess this is the part where I tell everybody my opinion about why I didn't love this movie the second time around. Ooh. Is because 25 years ago, we didn't have the influx of all of the shows that show how hard it is, quote unquote, to be a monarch, right? Now we've had The Crown, we've had Game of Thrones, which is a made up world, but is still very similar to the way that the kings and the queens of the Renaissance era lived. We've had The Tudors. We've had The Other Boleyn Girl, the book. We've had Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. By the way, read that trilogy. It's fucking brilliant. We've had a lot of introspection into the ways of kings and queens that watching Elizabeth and watching this movie for me now in 2023, I was just like, oh, all right. This is just like kind of a retread, and it didn't seem nearly as exciting as a lot of the other properties that I just mentioned. So I think for me, it probably was great. I don't really remember a lot of it, and I don't remember, loving it or hating it when I saw it 25 years ago. But I think now it just bored me to tears because I've seen this play out many times, and in some aspects better.
That's fair, but I don't know that it would be fair to say that this one's the retread. I mean, I think everybody else since 1998 would be the retread. And I mean, if you want to have your disdain go towards somebody, put it towards them and not Cate Blanchett and Geoffrey Rush. But I get what you're saying. Yeah. I agree. It's been done many times since. It's been done, some before. I mean, we would be remiss if we didn't mention, Tawdry's favorite person in the entire world. Betty Davis playing this, Queen Elizabeth as well.
Sure. And I think maybe I'm just in a little bit of like monarch overload because, the second Queen Elizabeth just died and there was all that pomp and circumstance and it's going to be a new coronation and I love the crown. And so perhaps I am just overloaded with like monarchism, and I love to watch all of that stuff. I love this sort of thing but for me watching it, I just was very bored this whole time, like from the jump.
And that's fair. Yeah. And look, the purpose of this is to look at it through a 2023 lens, and that's a very real reaction. So no, I'm not dismissing your reaction. No. But by any means.
I thought about it because I was like, I really had I was like, oh my God, I'm so bored. And I had it pretty much from the jump, and I had to sit back and think like, okay, rationally, why would that be? And I just think it's kind of like at this point now, 25 years later, because it is such a fascinating concept, especially in America, we don't have kings and queens, like monarchism and the way and monarchy and the way that it has sort of ebbed and flowed since, 1066 is very fascinating to a lot of people. But I just think it's sort of like, it's just been a lot, especially in like the last 10 years.
What do you think? What would you tweak in the movie then to make it better so that it wasn't as boring?
While keeping Cate and Geoffrey.
I mean, don't put me on the spot or anything.
Do your homework.
I just feel... I don't know. I think that I would have played up the intrigue a little bit more. I think I would have played up. I think that the transformation was great. And I think that was probably one of the most brilliant things that I've seen is just Cate Blanchett's subtle cues that she is going to be this all powerful figure at the end that you don't really even realize it. And you're like, holy shit. Like this is her trajectory and it's amazing. I would have showed a little bit more intrigue. I felt like it was really hard to keep the characters as to like who they were, even when we were discussing them earlier. Maybe trim down the story a little bit, just to make it a little bit more focused on the court, or less about like going to France and going here and going there, and it kept it a little bit more at home. Maybe introducing the story a little bit earlier so you get a little bit more of a sense of Mary Tudor and sort of her rise and the factors that played into Elizabeth. I don't know.
So basically doing more of a character study instead of a historical study.
Yeah, and maybe starting with the death of Henry VIII and going from there.
Okay.
That would be interesting.
All valid. I like this.
Yeah.
Okay. And then probably bring in a little bit more of actual conspiracy and people plotting, as opposed to just kind of hearing it as third party after the fact.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't have to be like twirl your mustache, sort of like that sort of plotting. But yeah, a little bit more of the backstory behind, really just the machinations of people, because you're sort of just dropped into it at the end of Mary Tudor's reign, but we don't know. Yes, it's Catholicism versus Protestantism, but there's obviously lots of other factors at play too. There was the fact that, Elizabeth was a bastard. It was the fact that Anne Boleyn was beheaded in the Tower and was seen as a whore, as a tramp, so it just, that those sort of things are interesting to me. And the intra-familiar stuff, I think is a little bit more interesting.
And it's interesting that you use those words or that term dropped into this period, because that was quite physically done with the camera work in the beginning of the movie, where we're looking at everything from a bird's eye view of what's taking place with the burning at the stake. And I like that directorial choice there. But I also, kind of playing back into what your comments were, this is a movie that, Eric Peterson would absolutely love because it had powerhouse woman at the helm. If I'm remembering correctly, he is very much a fan of a period piece, but it took a moment in time,
right,
instead of trying to cover the entire lifetime of this woman. Yeah. And that's why we got the end title cards to say what happened after this. I like the fact that it was just a snippet of time in this woman's reign as she came to power and solidified her iron grip on the throne.
So are you all ready for some fun facts?
Always.
more trivia than anything. So the costuming and composition of the coronation scene is actually based on Elizabeth's coronation portrait.
Oh,
so which I thought was kind of interesting. So her wearing her hair long, that's actually factual. Because she was actually trying to give the public a sense of her virginity, which
because her hair wasn't up,
didn't have any at that point. Yeah,
right.
Young like a child, so she's supposed to seem childlike as she's in that scene.
Interesting.
What's the purpose of the orb? Does anybody know in a coronation?
I'm quite sure that there is a meaning behind it, but I don't know what it is.
The staff in the orb. It seems really weird to be holding that giant pomegranate. I don't know.
I mean, that giant pomegranate is probably worth, $100 million because it's like bejeweled. It's got, dipped in like real fucking gold and stuff.
So we talked about the Duke of Norfolk not really doing much inside this movie. And the director realized that. So that's why most of the time, whenever you see him, he's actually in action. So like
he's a lot of moving, a lot of like rustling, like going down the corridors and stuff, moving around,
grabbing stuff, moving around. The scene with Sir Francis of Walsingham dining with Mary de Guise, that's actually based on a legend. So inside that, meaning that inside that scene when the Duke d'Anjou says that she looked like a man, Queen Elizabeth looked like a man, that is actually based on a legend. So apparently when Elizabeth was very young, to avoid a disease that was going around, and it might have been the plague, she was sent away to a village, in Bisley. And it's said that she actually died and was replaced with a very pretty boy child. And so it's a legend. And so Queen Elizabeth came back and she was actually a man, which would be another reason why she never married and always remained the Virgin Queen.
That's a lot of words to be like, we love men.
That sounds like something that men made up.
Yeah.
To answer to the fact that they had yet another female sovereign.
Right. Exactly. That's like, wow, I am hamstrung because I am a man, so I am going to make up this bullshit story.
Yeah, that reigned for 40 years and made England one of the most prosperous countries in the world.
Correct. Yeah.
And I'm sure that at Elizabeth's death, somebody probably examined her or saw the body. And we would have seen record. Like, that would have been well recorded if she did turn out to be a man. So, yeah. Hokum.
Remy Adefarasin became the first Black person to be nominated for Academy Award for Best Cinematography from this movie.
Absolutely deserved it.
Yes.
He did not win, unfortunately, right? I don't think he did.
No. I think
was robbed in so many ways. So many ways. This is one of 4 roles that Meryl Streep has been turned down for.
Oh shit.
She auditioned for it and did not get it? Wow.
What are the other 3? Do you know?
That I don't know.
Okay, I'll have to look it up.
I am intrigued.
That was a good ass piece of trivia. Like if I were to ever write do trivia again, that is definitely something that I will use. That's a great trivia fact. And also kind of insane, but I can't imagine Meryl Streep in this role. I can imagine her in, The Iron Lady, 20 years later, or 15 years later or whatever, but I cannot imagine her as Queen Elizabeth. I'm sorry.
And then lastly, when Prince William becomes king, he will be the first English monarch since Elizabeth to be related to Anne Boleyn.
That is a fun fact.
That is that's another good trivia piece.
I will file that one away for trivia night.
Yeah.
I have a feeling something like that would come up.
So, you guys ready for a game?
Yes.
Okay, so this game is called Points of View. So storytelling relies on the point of view. Most of this movie was really from Elizabeth's. Okay, so we're getting the story really based on her. I want you to make the same movie, or rather same events, but pick a different main character. Who is it and why? Who plays them? Who plays your Elizabeth? Because obviously we still need an Elizabeth. And then who directs? And Allie looks the most bored, so I'm going to say...
I don't. Not bored. I missed the who plays your Elizabeth. I missed that part, so I just have to quickly think of one. So go to Justin first.
Oh, okay.
I missed letter D, so I need to just really think about that. But yeah, so
who? Okay, Justin.
Please continue.
So look, I figure both of you are probably going to choose Robert Dudley, which is the Joseph Fiennes character. So just to try to be different. And plus I would love to know more about this person and their point of view. I chose Walshingham, the Geoffrey Rush role.
Nice.
So I considered a lot of great actors to play this role. And that was a really tough decision. Andy Serkis would have been a good one.
I love
Brendan
him.
Gleeson.
Also, check.
Idris Elba. Very interesting. Yeah. This was a good one that I came across. Werner Herzog. Can you imagine Werner Herzog in this role? No. Okay.
Is Werner Herzog still alive?
Isn't he? Oh gosh.
I don't know. It just seems really...
Well, let me go on to my last person that I did not choose that I really struggled with. I thought about Denai Guerrera. Do you know?
Oh yes, I love her.
So she plays Okoye, the head of the Wakandan Armed Forces in the MCU. So I struggled with this last one because when I think of Denai, I immediately said, this is perfect, absolutely perfect. But the one thing that I'm a stickler for in period pieces is historical accuracy. Now, yes, I'm fine, replacing, somebody that is historically white with somebody that is now, a person of color. No problem with that whatsoever. But changing that sex was something that I would have a struggle with if I am the film producer. So with that said, I ultimately chose Stellan Skarsgård.
Oh, good.
So he's a great actor, right? Plus he has an ability to do kind of like what we talked about with Joseph Fiennes earlier. Not Joseph Fiennes, his brother, who we talked mostly about. He has that ability to paint his face with a sort of unhinged look that's not only menacing but truly terrifying because you don't fully know what he's capable of or willing to do to get what he wants in order to serve his queen. So I felt like Stellan Skarsgård would be a good choice for this. For Elizabeth, I'm not sure if your rules dictate that, I can't use the same person, but my first pick would be Cate Blanchett. And if I could not go with Cate Blanchett, I think she could still do this role.
Definitely.
Hair and makeup is one thing. We now have new technologies to age down too. But my alternative would be Carey Mulligan. You might remember her from Promising Young Woman and Gatsby. She's really good in those quiet, contemplative moments, and I'd love to see her. To really see her just kind of boil over, but keep it all in. I think she would be good for that. And of course, for Robert Dudley, I would say I would pick Harry Styles because why not? And I would say that all this would be directed by Ryan Coogler. So he's done Black Panther, he's done Creed. I would love to see him take a stab at something like this. And I'd also like him to write the story. And of course, to round this out, because I love movie scores, and you probably expect this from me, this one was scored by somebody that I wasn't terribly familiar with. I had to look him up. His name is David Hirschfelder, and he actually did the score for Shine as well. So the other Geoffrey Rush vehicle. So I chose Alan Silvestri. I know that most people know him for like Back to the Future and Forrest Gump, but his recent work for the MCU has been amazing. And I'd love to hear what he'd bring to this project. As much as I love Hans Zimmer, Alan Silvestri just really is so incredibly versatile, and I think he would do well for this one. So those are my picks.
Wow, bonus points. Pulling in somebody to score it too.
Always.
I do not have that many bonus points, but I am ready. So yes. I chose Isabel, who in the movie sort of dies by a poisonous dress that was supposed to be worn by the queen, but also in the throes of having sex with Robert Dudley, aka Joseph Fiennes. And I felt interested in her story. And I think that in my movie, we would open it up a little bit because she sort of turns on the queen at a certain point, and I don't know if it's because she doesn't understand why poor Robert Dudley is left all by his hot lonesomeness, or does she just not believe in the queen anymore? Usually your ladies in waiting are pretty staunchly for you. So I would be intrigued to see a little bit more of the backstory behind why she turns towards the end. And so that said, we need a little star power. So my Isabel is going to be played by Zendaya. And yes, so I think that she could imbue that role with a little bit of a little intrigue, a little suspense, a little bit of a little bit of that changeover.
I thought about her for my Elizabeth role.
Yes, but my Elizabeth is going to be another woman full of, I think, like sort of British steel, Emily Blunt. I feel like she would be a great Elizabeth.
Good choice.
Yeah, it just sort of, when I was scanning the list, I first had Florence Pugh, and I think that she could also be a great Elizabeth. But then I saw Emily Blunt, and I was like, oh no, done. I feel like she doesn't put up with any bullshit, and neither did Elizabeth. And my director is going to be Ava DuVernay. I don't know if she's ever done like a straight period piece like this, but I would be very interested in her sort of feminist, woman-focused take on a movie like this. So that's my point of view.
I love it. Okay, so mine, I originally, and I literally just changed it, was going to do Mary de Guise, and then do that half of the story where, she's trying to take over the country and then battling, essentially trying to outmaneuver Elizabeth in a sense. But I think instead, I want to tell the story from Norfolk's lover, because she's at court with him at all times. She ends up pulling the rug out from under him and working for Walsingham. And so I think actually seeing the movie and not giving the movie to Norfolk, I want this still to be female centric. Seeing how she's affected, and then seeing all the duplicitousness happen from her point of view, because she'd be part of all of that, what that went on, could actually be really interesting. I would have her played by Claire Foy. I think she would bring a lot of power to that role. Still could be very sexy. I would have my Elizabeth played by Zoe Boyle. She was from a British actress who was actually in Sons of Anarchy. And then I would have my director be, it's interesting that you mentioned Promising Young Woman, Emerald Fennell.
Yeah, I love that movie.
Yeah.
This is a movie about women. I want it to be directed by a woman to bring those true points of view here. I did not go so far as to bring in a screenwriter or as somebody to score it. I did not get any bonus points in that part. I like all these ideas. I think I would love to see this kind of story from a different perspective. So I as Eric always said, Hollywood, call us. I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing.
I like that.
Okay, so next up, let's get your final thoughts here. Let's go through skip, rent, or buy. For those that maybe have been listening for the first time, skip, royalty is overrated and you'd rather be roaming abroad. Rent, court is fun, but the throne is for chumps. And buy, I want that fucking throne. So let's reverse this here. Allie, you go first.
All right, I'm going to straddle a line here. Kristen's going to kill me when she puts our notes in. But I'm going to be a half skip, half rent. If you have not seen this movie, it's a rent. If you have seen this movie, it's a skip.
Well, that's basically a rent, right? Like you should see it at least once.
I mean, okay, fine. If we're defining it that way.
Yes.
I mean, I guess I'm a rent. I'm a reluctant rent. Let's put it that way.
That's fair.
I think that people should see it, but I think that if you're seeing it for the first time in 2023, just be forewarned that it might not be what you expect.
Okay, fair. Justin?
Solid rent. I don't think it's necessary to view it multiple times. I am glad that I watched it again, because the first time I saw it was probably 15 years ago. Didn't remember a thing about it, but I just remembered I loved it. Do I love it as much today? No, but Absolutely. Go watch it at least once. And I also recommend the follow-up film as well. Not quite as good, but I do like seeing Cate Blanchett in a little bit more action and taking more of an active role in leading her country in battle.
I'm going to follow up with an actual buy. I love period pieces. This is one of my favorite period pieces. This is actually one of my top 10 films of all time.
Wow.
Really? Yikes.
Yes, it is.
The Power of Cate.
Yeah, The Power of Cate. Yeah.
I mean, look, Tar was my favorite movie of 2022, so
I still have
Power of Cate.
Said one person ever.
Me and friend of the pod, Joe. I don't know if it was his favorite movie, but we watched it together. We both loved it. I will defend Tar until the death.
And Tar beat out Marcel the Shell with shoes on. Really? In your book? Okay.
No, I'm not watching any Marcel the Shell. No, thank you. It's not for me.
We're done here.
No, I watched a clip and I was like, no, not for me.
Not everything is for everyone.
Very true.
Well, that wraps it up for 1998 this year. Our next movie is going to be the first of the interstitial, so we're going to be enjoying that 1993 classic Jurassic Park, also starring Richard Attenborough.
I'm so excited. I'm going to reread the book too, I think, before we watch it, because I haven't read it.
Oh, that's a great idea.
I haven't read it in a really long time.
I can't wait to hear you guys do this one. It's going to be so much fun to listen to the pod for this one.
Honestly, like our interstitials, when you see them, they're top notch. These 4 movies before we get to our 50th anniversary, I think, are pretty awesome.
I mean, I have high expectations because this is another one of my top 10 films of all time. I think Jurassic Park is just like almost a perfect film.
I haven't seen it in a minute. I want to say maybe I haven't seen it in 10, 12 years probably. So, I mean, I've watched the new ones, which are, they're fine. They're a fine day at the cinema with some popcorn, but I'm excited to see the OG. And I think I'm going to read the book too, because it's, not super long. So.
No, anytime I see it on TV and syndication, my remote stops. It's always Jurassic Park, Fifth Element, and Die Hard. Those are the 3 things that I always stop scanning for.
Oh, mine are Erin Brockovich, Steel Magnolias. Those are like a top 2.
Nice.
When Harry Met Sally, like if I see those, if I'm flipping through, yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Justin, I didn't know that you and I had such similar taste in movies.
We do. In last season, when you did not do Fifth Element, my heart broke a little bit more.
I still haven't seen that movie. I know.
Oh my God, that's a Shonda.
I know. To
see that movie.
Good way to use the very good use of that word.
I'm getting better.
Yeah, good.
Well, Justin, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Justin. This was awesome, per usual.
Thanks for having me. Yay. Glad to be back.
And as always, I'm Matt.
I'm Allie.
Be kind. Rewind.
You've been listening to The Rewind Project. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, and Google Play. Please subscribe and rate us. It helps a lot. We love your comments and questions. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and via our new phone number at 202-618-2402. Thanks for listening. Be kind. Rewind.
Greta Gerwig, of all people, is doing a movie about Barbie.
After Little Women, like the preeminent version of Little Women for me.
This is the littlest women. We're talking about Barbie now. So.